Browns reporters forced to apologize. Shedeur Sanders and Andrew Berry win big. Just days ago, the Cleveland media was tearing everything apart, questioning decisions, doubting leadership, even targeting Shedeur Sanders before he proved anything. But now, the same voices are walking it all back. And what changed so fast that it forced an apology?
Hi, Mary Kay. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How you doing?
Hi, Mary Kay. We are doing good. Question: Is draft weekend the hardest weekend of the year for a beat reporter when it comes to covering
It's
the NFL?
tough.
Yeah.
You know what? This weekend was particularly challenging in terms of drafts because there were so many trades and it was hard to keep up with things. And normally on day two, most teams will have 2 picks and no trades. And, we just had a really insane day two trying to keep up with everything. But, it's fun. It's fast paced. It's a little bit crazy. It's hectic. But, it was kind of fun to see how it was all unfolding.
This wasn't just criticism. It was personal. For weeks leading into the draft, tension had been building between the Cleveland media and the Browns organization. And at the center of it all was longtime reporter Mary Kay Cabot, a voice that carried weight, influence, and expectation. But something felt different this time. There was frustration, especially after the fallout surrounding Kevin Stefanski. Some voices in the media openly questioned why, if changes were happening, Andrew Berry wasn't under the same pressure. The narrative slowly began to form. Maybe the front office wasn't as stable as it seemed. Maybe the decision-making wasn't aligned. Maybe they were getting it wrong. And then came Shedeur Sanders. Even before he fully stepped into the spotlight, there was already noise, doubt, speculation, a quiet resistance from what some fans would later call the anybody but Shedeur crowd. The skepticism wasn't loud at first, but it was there. And in sports media, whispers don't stay whispers for long. It became a divide. On one side, a front office trying to reshape its identity. On the other, media voices questioning every move before it even played out. But what no one realized at that moment was how quickly everything was about to flip. And if you thought this tension would stay behind closed doors, you were wrong. Because what happened next forced everyone into the spotlight. Draft weekend arrived, and with it, chaos, trades, movement, aggressive decisions. This wasn't a quiet conservative approach. This was calculated, bold, and unapologetic. And suddenly, the same front office that had been questioned was in control. Mary Kay herself admitted it. She said, "I did not think that he could top last year's draft, but somehow, some way, I think he actually may have pulled it off." That wasn't just a compliment. That was a complete shift, she continued. On paper, this looks like he knocked it out of the park in a big way. Think about that. Just days earlier, doubt. Now, knocked it out of the park. Andrew Berry didn't just make picks. He built a statement, multiple key selections, strategic movement across the board. A clear plan, executed with precision. Even deeper than that, he maximized everything. 10 players, future picks, flexibility. This wasn't luck, this was control. And suddenly, the narrative started collapsing. Because when results show up, opinions get exposed. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This wasn't just about the draft. This was about timing, because as the Browns were building something real, the media was still catching up. And when you're late to the truth, sometimes the only option left is to change your tone. But fans noticed, and they weren't quiet about it. It happened live, on air, during the Baskin and Phelps show. The same voice that had been critical now sounded completely different. Mary Kay said she was impressed with what Andrew Berry did and his staff.
Impressed with what Andrew Berry did and his staff?
Yes, I did not think that he could top last year's draft, but somehow, some way, I think he actually may have pulled it off. Now, we have to see how these guys are going to play and perform. That's the most important thing. But on paper, this looks like he knocked it out of the park in a big way. I had told you guys so many times going in that I felt they had to come out of this draft with 2 premier pass catchers, not just, hey, you drafted somebody in the 5th round or the 6th round that might be able to help you out. No, I had been very vocal about stating that I felt they needed 2 Pro Bowl caliber pass catchers added to this football team in this draft, whether it was 2 receivers and a tight end. 2 receivers or a receiver and a tight end, whatever the case may be. And they did that, and they did it early on. Those are very, very premium picks that they took those receivers with. They got their left tackle of the future. At least they hope it turns out that way. And then they added a lot of other really good pieces. I mean, they're so excited about EW Emmanuel Neil Warren.
Yeah, the play-by-play guy from Toledo told us yesterday, just call him E-Man.
She talked about strategy, execution, even praised specific needs being addressed. But for a lot of fans, it didn't feel genuine. It felt reactive. Because this wasn't just analysis. This was a tone shift. And people picked up on it instantly. Comments started flooding in. Where was this energy before the draft? Now suddenly he's a genius? You're trying to get back in good graces. That last one hit hard. Because it raised a deeper question. Was this about truth or access? In the NFL, relationships matter. Access matters. Being on the inside matters. And when that access feels threatened, narratives can change fast. Some fans believed that's exactly what was happening. That this wasn't just a correction. It was a repositioning. And the more she spoke, the more that feeling grew. Because the shift wasn't subtle, it was obvious. Because it raised a deeper question, and once the audience sees that, trust becomes fragile. But if you think the media was the only one feeling pressure, think again. Because inside the Browns organization, they had already started moving differently. Press conferences can tell you a lot if you know what to look for. And in this case, the message wasn't even hidden. Andrew Berry made it clear. When certain questions came up, he didn't engage. He didn't entertain the narrative. At one point, it was essentially dismissed. I don't even want to talk to you about that. That wasn't just an answer. That was a boundary. And then came Todd Monken. His energy at the podium said everything. When asked about topics that didn't align with the moment, especially during the draft, there was visible frustration. Because while the team was focused on building, the questions were still stuck in old narratives. And that disconnect, it exposed everything. This wasn't just tension anymore. This was separation. The insiders, and those being pushed out. The message was clear. If you're not aligned with where we're going, you're not part of this. That's a dangerous place for media to be. Because once access starts slipping, influence follows. And suddenly, the tone change makes a lot more sense. Because it wasn't just about being right anymore. It was about staying relevant. But by then, the damage might have already been done. So what really happened? Was this just a great draft? Or something bigger? Let's break it down. Andrew Berry finally had the tools. First-round picks, flexibility, and control. And he used them perfectly. Strategic trades, targeted selections. Building not just for now, but for the future. Even Mary Kay acknowledged it, pointing out how having multiple picks allowed him to maximize the selections. But here's the deeper layer. This exposed previous criticism. Because now the context was clear. In past years, limitations existed. Fewer picks, less flexibility. But now, no excuses. And Berry delivered. Which brings us back to Shedeur Sanders. He wasn't just a player in this story. He became a symbol. A symbol of doubt turned into belief. Of narratives being challenged in real time. And when the results started backing the decisions, the entire conversation shifted. Not slowly, instantly. But that kind of shift comes with consequences. Because when people remember what was said before, they don't forget easily. And that leaves one final question. Who really won here? This wasn't just about a draft. It was about power. About who controls the narrative, who earns trust, and who gets left behind. Andrew Berry didn't just win on paper. He changed perception. Shedeur Sanders didn't just enter the conversation. He became part of a bigger story. And the media? They were forced to adjust. But when adjustments happen this fast, people notice. And once credibility gets questioned, it doesn't come back easily. So now we're here. A front office rising. A media landscape shifting. And a fan base watching more closely than ever. Because the next move, it matters even more. Was this a one-time moment of brilliance? Or the start of something real? And maybe the biggest question of all, was this just a draft victory? Or the beginning of a power shift in Cleveland that no one can stop? Because if this is how quickly the narrative can flip, then what happens when the games actually begin? If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep NFL stories like this, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Because the next story might be even bigger.